Have you ever seen a white person? No, you haven't. You've never seen a pure white person, but you have seen light pink people who are sometimes reddish or tan or alabaster or beige, sometimes light blue or green or yellowish even. These are all the actual colors that we see in what we call white people. But never pure white, that doesn't exist in humans. Even albinos, the lightest of all people, tend to have a light pinkish color to them. So you may think you've seen a white person, and you may even be someone who thinks you're white, because that's what society labeled you. But let's be smarter than that. Being white is not some God-given divine term to describe Europeans and Caucasians. It's man-made. You've never seen a pure white person who is the actual, real representation of the color white, unless you're colorblind, or someone puts on makeup to make themselves whiter, or do some sort of photo manipulation. But why is this important? Why does this matter? Because who cares if people with lighter skin call themselves white? It's just another way that humans classify themselves, right? Wrong. It's important because what we see many people doing is using the word white to represent themselves as if it makes them more pure, innocent, divine, or entitled than everyone else who isn't white. So the problem is that when you label people as white, many are so foolish that they start to think the attributes and characteristics of the real actual color white applies to them when it doesn't. Because in the world, what is the color white supposed to represent? It's seen as something pure and clean or holy even, right? You hear people saying things like, oh, she's so white and angelic, so pure. But no, Caucasians being considered white is not something ordained by God. The first people to call themselves white were a small group of Europeans, and they did it for political reasons, economic reasons, and to justify the mistreatment of others who aren't white. One of the reasons it caught on so fast was because it made people feel good to associate themselves with a color that is supposed to represent purity and holiness. So this way of thinking is especially effective on foolish people who don't know history. But we have to be smart enough to realize the psychological impact and influence it can have on someone to think that they are something pure and holy just because they are classified as white. When a person associates themselves with the color white and its attributes, it gives them a sense of being just naturally pure and just naturally righteous, which can cause that person to feel a sense of entitlement and superiority, or even feel like he is just naturally a good person since he's considered this pure white being. And this mentality can cause people to look at everyone else who is not white and think they aren't pure or are lesser people just because they don't have white skin, or pink skin. And this is actually a lazy person's version of greatness and superiority, by the way. To think that just because of your skin color, you're automatically a great and supreme person when skin color isn't even something you can control. Saying that a person is great and good just because they're white and nothing else is actually lowering the bar on what it means to be great. This way of thinking leads to an even bigger problem when people use this mindset to say, okay, since we are the white ones and white is what's pure and holy, then that must mean God loves us and prefers us more than other people because God loves what is pure and holy. God loves the light. But see those people over there? Those are the black ones. And you know, blackness is related to darkness and evil, and since God doesn't like darkness and evil, he must not like those black people. They must be cursed or something. They are the bad ones, and we are the good ones, because they're black and we are white. This is the foolish mentality that people can have when they don't have the knowledge about who and what they really are, and when their identity is built on this very fragile fairy tale. Because if your main identity is being white, then your identity is fragile, especially if you consider that white DNA is not even dominant, it's recessive. This reality can cause you to view people who are not white as an instant threat if you feel like this illusion of whiteness is something you have to protect. This is why we see some white people that are filled with so much hatred towards other races, it can reach the point where their hatred grows into violence. Also, Imagine how easy it is to manipulate a person who believes white people good and black people bad. Such narrow-minded thoughts make it so easy for smarter white people to come in and take advantage of those with this low-level thinking. Always remember, just because people call themselves white doesn't mean they're actually white. If you look closely at their skin, Caucasians and Europeans are not true representations of what the color white is. Most of them are either pink or alabaster or one of the other colors I mentioned earlier. So when they take the characteristics and the attributes of the word white to try to apply it to them, they're actually stealing and lying. The idea of a white person is just a social construct, not a biological reality. They don't exist, it's a fairy tale. And the same thing exists with black people. There is no completely pitch black person, and most people who we call black are actually various shades of brown. Even if you look at the people with the darkest skin, they're actually a very, very dark brown, but there's no completely pitch black person. Now, for the people who think having white skin is the best and something pure that should be preserved and put on a pedestal, what does science have to say about pale white skin? Is it healthy to be pale? Is it healthy to have skin that is as light as humanly possible? No, it's actually not. People with pale white skin have significantly higher rates of skin cancer than anyone else. And the reason why is because they have no natural protection against sunlight. Sunscreen works to an extent, but even that isn't good for you to be using every day. So it's interesting that there are people who still try to put being as white as possible on a pedestal, even though having pale white skin is not healthy. I'm seeing a lot of clips pop up on my feeds nowadays of white people saying things like they need to preserve the white race as if it's this pure, sacred thing that needs to be protected. The concept of being white is very weak and flimsy because there are many groups today who are now considered white people, but historically they were not considered white people, like the Irish, the Italians, and even Jewish people. It's amazing how what's considered a white person can actually change and evolve throughout history, and they still claim to be this pure thing. And you know what? A lot of people are gonna hate me for saying this. But for those white people who really want the best for their future generations and for their children and grandchildren to be as strong and healthy as possible, what they need to do is find the darkest person that they are the most compatible with and have children with them. That would be the smart decision so that their future generations can actually have some natural protection against the sun instead of always having to worry about finding sunscreen or an umbrella. But you can only accept this possibility when we realize the concept of being a pure white person is all a made-up fairy tale, because people are still clinging to this idea of preserving whiteness as if it makes them pure. When they're not even white, they're pink. Let me tell you something, as a darker skinned person, when I see a shady side of the street and a sunny side, I actually avoid the shade and walk in the sun because it fills me with life and energy and warmth and vitality without me having to worry about it killing me by giving me cancer. And I'm not saying this to brag, I just want to give you a little insight as to what's possible. If you consider that the ozone layer can get thinner if humans don't take care of the environment, then that means sun rays would get stronger. And what do you think the future entails for white people who have lessened protection from the ozone layers against the sun rays? It would be a future of even more sickness and more skin cancer. Now, I'm not saying you should have kids with someone just because of their skin color. That can lead to problems. So don't forget about the part where I said you need to make sure that you and that person are actually compatible and share at least the same values. If you ever meet someone who believes I'm a pure white person, give that person a reality check and let them know they're actually pink. And that's fine. It's okay to be pink. Just be pink and accept who you are, but you're not white. You're not a true representation of what it means to be white. All the people that you think are white, look at them again and look at them very closely. They're light pink. There's no such thing as white people, just like there's no such thing as black people, and everyone is colored. Yes, if you're a Caucasian person, always remember, you are a colored person too, because there are many colors on the outside of you. Being white or black is all a fabrication, a social construct. White people are fictional characters because being considered white is not a God-given term. It's made up by a bunch of people who wanted to feel better about themselves. Before you go, an important thing to keep in mind is that all human beings can trace their roots back to ancestors that came from Africa. When the world fully acknowledges and accepts that fact, then we can progress even further as humans and have true unity, peace, and harmony between one another. But what do you think though? Do you still think you're a white person? Don't forget to subscribe and share your comments below. Peace.